Hello and welcome to this primary election debate for Democratic candidates from Arizona's Congressional District 1. This debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Steve Goldstein and I'm joined by Richard Ruelas. We'll be co-moderating tonight's debate.
The format for this debate should be familiar to you, but the way we're sharing this debate is part of a brand new effort to support democracy in Arizona. Thanks to a partnership with the Clean Elections Commission and the Arizona Media Association, we're working to make sure these 2024 debates are the most accessible in Arizona history. That means this debate and dozens more between now and November will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. It's a shared effort among hundreds of local media brands across Arizona.
Transparency is critical here. That's why these debates have been designed with input from a broad group of journalists in Arizona representing urban and rural communities. And we've tried to keep the rules simple. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement and 1 minute for a closing statement. Candidates have drawn straws to determine the order. Throughout the debate, Richard and I will pose questions to each candidate, allow them to answer, and then make sure other candidates have a chance to respond. Whenever a question is directed to a specific candidate, only that candidate's microphone will be open. At all other times, every microphone will be open. Thank you to voters across Arizona who've submitted questions for this debate. We have reviewed all of them to make sure every voice is heard. However, no candidates have been given advance access to any of the questions.
And with that, let's introduce our 6 candidates for this debate. Andre Cherney, Marlene Galan Woods, Andrew Horn, Kurt Cromer, Connor O'Callahan, and Amish Shah. And Dr. Shah, you have the first opening statement. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Amish Shah, and I am running for United States Congress for the 1st Congressional District. I am an emergency physician. I've been in practice for about 20 years, and I work currently at the Mayo Clinic right in the heart of our district. I'm also a 3-term member of the Arizona House of Representatives, and I've had the chance to serve our community for over the last 5 years. I don't have to tell the people in this district what is at stake in this election, but I do want to tell you why I am the strongest candidate to take on the current Republican incumbent and win this seat. Over the last 6 cycles, we have run a candidate, good Democrats, who had never won an election before, and then we lost. I think we cannot make that mistake again. We need a candidate who has won tough elections, and I'm the only one on this stage who has done that. Over the last 7 years, I knocked on nearly 20,000 doors personally. Those of you who have met me, you know I've been to your door. I've listened to your concerns, and I've tried to translate those concerns into actual bills that made a difference in people's lives. And that means I passed more bills than any Democrat in over a decade in this state. That includes bills to ban late-night fireworks, bills to give Arizonans easier access to medical care, etc. Those of you who know me personally probably also know that I am a huge animal advocate in the state. And yes, if puppies and kitties could vote, I'm sure I'd win this election in a landslide. But it's not just about the bills you pass, it's about the bills you block. In 2022, there was an effort to ban mifepristone, the abortion pill, here in Arizona. And I led the way on that one using my medical expertise, and we were successful in blocking it. So they gave me the Women's Health Champion Legislator of the Year award from the OBGYNs who have endorsed my campaign, who are leading the fight in this effort. So that's the difference in this race. Talking about these issues is a great thing. However, I'm the only candidate who has delivered results on all of these issues, and I hope to earn your vote for Congress. Thank you.
And Mr. Connor O'Callahan, you have the next opening statement. 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Connor O'Callahan, and I'm running to represent the 1st Congressional District here in Arizona, the very same district where I grew up. I was born in Ireland, and I moved to what is now CD1 when I was 4 years old. My wife, Tina, was born in Iran, and when she was only 2, she and her family had to flee from an extremist regime that came in to take over during that country's revolution. That very same regime is now threatening to push us into World War III, meddling in Middle Eastern affairs to our detriment. Democracy is not something that we take for granted in the O'Callahan household. My wife's story and my story is really one of the American dream. This very district allowed my family to seek and achieve the American dream. Just like my kids now, I attended public schools from K through 12 in the district. My teachers and my coaches led me to believe that I could achieve anything that I wanted to achieve in life. But when I think about what it was like growing up here 30 years ago, it was much better. Women had the right to have an abortion, we had an assault weapons ban, and fighting climate change was cool. MAGA extremists like David Schweikert are the very reason why we've gone backwards in this district. to 1864 most recently. That has to stop now. I'm from this district. I'm for this district. I have long held progressive values, and I can flip this seat without sacrificing those values. I also have the team and the resources that it's going to take to beat David Schweikert. My entire campaign team is the same team that got Adrian Fontes elected Secretary of State in 2022 by the widest margin of any candidate statewide. I'm the only candidate on this stage who has more money, more cash on hand than David Schweikert. I've raised money from all 50 states because this is a national race with national implications. Please join me. Let's beat David Schweikert. Vote Connor O'Callahan this July. Thank you.
And Ms. Marlene Galan-Woods, next 2 minutes are yours.
Thank you. My name is Marlene Galan-Woods. I'm a first-generation Cuban American. My parents came to this country in the 60s, fleeing Castro's communism. I've lived in Arizona most of my adult life, 36 years. This is where I met my husband, Grant Woods, on a blind date, where we got married, raised our 5 children. Our youngest, we adopted from Guatemala. As a former broadcast journalist, I have held the powerful accountable, and I have exposed corruption. Last election, I chaired, I chaired Adrian Fontes' campaign for Secretary of State. I stood up for democracy when Republicans were running around spreading dangerous misinformation about our elections. And now we must hold Congressman David Schweikert accountable. David Schweikert would pass a national ban on abortion. He wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. David Schweikert is an election denier and a climate denier. And not only that, he is part of this do-nothing Republican group who can barely tie their shoelaces together, much less get legislation done. So it is time, after all of the years of chaos and dysfunction, that we send a courageous truth teller to Washington, D.C. And here's who knows I am that leader: the people and the organizations supporting our campaign. Emily's List, Attorney General Chris Mays, former Governor Janet Napolitano, former U.S. Senator Dennis DeConcini. I have the majority, overwhelming majority of labor behind me. We're talking about firefighters and educators and carpenters. They're behind our campaign because they trust me to beat David Schweikert. They trust me to take this fight to Congress and have their back. I look forward to earning your support and your vote. Thank you.
And Mr. Kurt Cromer, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I have 2 minutes to tell you my life story. And it's actually very simple. My life story has been dedicated to helping people, often in their darkest hour. So I am the only candidate here who has actually already worked for Congress for 10 years as an investigator with a top secret clearance. I am the only candidate here that has helped children with life-threatening illnesses when I served as the COO of the Make-A-Wish Foundation of America. I am the only candidate that's actually worked along the border, providing humanitarian assistance to asylum seekers and immigrants when I served as the CEO of the American Red Cross for this part of the country. I am also the only candidate that has worked to end genocides, mass atrocities, and human trafficking around the world. And I am the only candidate with a background in international affairs, international law, and the rules of armed conflict. That's kind of important given what's going on in the world these days. I'm also the only candidate that has responded to terrorist attacks, natural disasters, and mass shootings. I helped lead the Red Cross response to the mass shooting in El Paso. And so when you listen to us tonight, please think about what we have done. Actions speak louder than words. My life has been dedicated to helping people. That's what I plan to bring to Congress. That is actually how we beat David Schweikert. We bring a candidate to him that will resonate with people across the political spectrum. And I ask for your vote. Thank you.
And Dr. Andrew Horn, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Dr. Andrew Horn, and I am not related to Tom Horn. That is a critically important thing to remember when looking at who to vote for. I'm working against Tom Horn to remove David Schweikert. Daddy, there's a shooter here. I was at work when I got that text, and I have to say it's probably the worst text that any parent can possibly get from their child. I'm an Arizona native, born and raised here, and when I was growing up here, my parents didn't have to worry about their children getting murdered because of gun violence. But I do. Eleanor should be learning, but instead, she's crying, hiding in a closet. Thankfully, Eleanor was safe, but parents and children should not have to live like this. As an Arizona native, I've been fighting against what David Schweikert's been doing. There are three things that got me into this race: public education, gun safety, and women's rights. The Dobbs decision was a critical moment in American history, and our representative, David Schweikert, wants to see bans like the 1864 abortion ban that's been in Arizona here over the last few weeks. He wants that nationally. He wants to take away women's rights. He's working against the future for our children, for our women, for all of us. I'm out here asking for your vote, working with people every day. We're a community-led campaign. We get out, meet people at the doors, and communicate with them. So absolutely, reach out to me and ask me a question. Ask what you want to hear, because I will tell you the truth. Thank you.
And Mr. Andre Cherney, 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share with you what some folks call a spoiler alert. Tonight you're going to see 6 good people, all of whom are going to state very similar positions on the issues we're going to be talking about. But I hope you'll see something else tonight too, that there's only one person on this stage with a 25-year track record that Democrats can trust of actually fighting for our values, of actually making progress on the critical challenges we face. Building a fairer economy, fighting the climate crisis, doing things like making sure that we protect our democracy and freedom. For me, these aren't the words of a campaign, they've been the work of my life. And they're personal to me. All 4 of my grandparents were concentration camp survivors. My parents grew up under communism. And so no one will fight harder to make sure that we protect our democracy and our freedoms, including my wife and my daughter's rights to control their own body. I grew up in a small upstairs apartment where I saw my immigrant parents struggle to make ends meet. But because America invested in a kid like me, with public schools and public libraries and Pell Grants, I went from being that kid whose parents didn't speak much English to working in the White House for President Clinton, working with Barack Obama to create his historic plan for America, change we can believe in. After 9/11, I enlisted to serve in the military, and I served as Arizona Assistant Attorney General, prosecuting fraudsters. I was elected to be the chair of the Arizona Democratic Party and took on extreme Republicans here in our state, and I built a business to help millions of people fight the climate crisis. I have the track record that Democrats can trust. I hope to earn your support in this election.
Thank you all for those opening statements. And now to the question portion of the debate. Dr. Shah, there's been a lot of discussion about inflation and the economy overall. How would you respond to someone who hears about Intel expansion, TSMC coming to Arizona, and yet this person and their family have to work 2 jobs? They're not seeing the benefits of what some say is a prosperous economy. What would you say to those who have doubts about the economy and how you would help that going forward?
And first and foremost, it starts with listening. It starts by understanding what are the issues that are affecting them. Whether is it gas, is it milk, is it the cost of food, is it the cost of housing, is it the cost of health care? While I was knocking on all these doors over all these years, these are the real conversations that we've had with the voters. And they've told me, they've explained these things to me, how it is uneven, how some people can be helped and some people can't. So first and foremost is to understand what them and their particular situation. So we've strived to do that. Then I think that the job of somebody who is in politics is to go out there and try to help them with these things. So what are the big ways in which government can actually help solve the problems that they're facing? And so inflation is there, it's real. And I will add that it has been a worldwide phenomenon. And it has come down significantly, but that still said, that doesn't lessen the pain for somebody who's having trouble with their kitchen table issues. So a couple big things that I talk about with regard to this is here in the Valley, and you mentioned TSMC and Intel. So they're bringing a lot of jobs to the area, but the thing is we have a serious imbalance between the supply and demand of housing right here in the Valley, and people feel it. Young people especially are telling me they cannot afford a new home. They will not be able to afford rent. That's an issue. And so government can make policies to make it easier to build and build up and build sustainably and also help us resolve that so that we can ease the prices of housing, as well as the other big one I hear is healthcare. Of course, it's my industry, right? And I want to see the prices of prescription drugs come down, premiums, or affordability of healthcare. These are huge things that affect the daily lives of the people that I've spoken to.
So this is somewhat of an open forum on each of these questions. We're not going to go in order, but if any of you want to chime in on this, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'd love to jump in on that. The prices that people see at the gas pump, grocery store, paying for housing, these aren't accidents. David Schweikert is somebody who voted to stop the federal government from being able to crack down on price gouging. While the big oil companies have made record profits, he did the same thing with the grocery store aisle. So we need somebody in this congressional seat who's actually going to be fighting for middle-class people. David Schweikert was responsible for the largest tax cut ever for big corporations and billionaires, and at the same time, the largest tax increase for middle-class families that we ever saw in American history. He's got that exactly wrong. We need to start doing right by people and understand that our economy grows from the middle out, not from the top down. That's one of the things that differentiates us with Republicans.
Well, Mr. Cromer.
Yeah, somehow the Democratic Party over the years has ceded this idea of fiscal responsibility to the Republican Party. Nothing could be farther from the truth. The Republican Party is the party of fiscal irresponsibility. If you want to help those working families, you do things like increase the child earned income tax credit. We basically got rid of childhood poverty during COVID when that was in place, and now it's gone away. Childhood poverty was gone because of that. Pre-K education. These kinds of things help working families, and it's the Republican Party that roadblocks that every single time. And over time, those programs pay for themselves. It is fiscally responsible to invest in our citizens, our families, and our children.
And staying on the economy for you, Mr. O'Callaghan, if you make it to Capitol Hill, one of the questions you'll have to answer is whether to keep or repeal the Trump tax cuts. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I've been asked this question for months, Richard, so I'm glad that you're bringing it up again. I've spent almost 20 years working on Wall Street. When I was an undergraduate, I studied economics at the Wharton School of Business. I also received an engineering degree. I have my master's in public administration, and I have a law degree. So I bring the academic and professional expertise to bear on tax policy and other economic issues, including the ones we were just discussing. So I will answer the tax question directly, but I also want to say that we need a candidate who can message properly on the economy. And that means talking about how good the economy has done under President Biden. So we have stock markets at near record highs, unemployment at near record lows. Unemployment from minorities is at historic lows. But people are feeling the squeeze at home. People are feeling worse off than they felt a few years ago. If they think that Donald Trump and David Schweikert are the ones that are going to fix that for them, they are sorely mistaken. We are the party that's always been the party of the American dream. We're going to lift people up and help them. David Schweikert pushed as hard as anybody for the Trump tax cuts. He views himself as a deficit hawk. He needs to go back and take Econ 101 at a community college because he doesn't understand how a budget deficit works. You can't push for these tax cuts and then say we have to cut Medicare and Social Security to make up for it. So I think as we get closer to 2025, we know the economy is doing well. It's absolutely time to let those tax cuts sunset, and we need to revamp our tax code and make sure that it works for the middle class and that it works for small businesses, because right now it advantages large corporations and it advantages the wealthy.
Ms. Galone-Woods, you've had some thoughts on the Trump tax cuts.
I would absolutely. That is just a ridiculous bill that was passed, and it absolutely needs to be repealed. They gave away $3 trillion to the wealthiest Americans. while the middle class in this country struggles. As I go around the district and I talk to folks, this is what I'm hearing. There is still a disconnect between how much money folks are bringing home and how much they have left over for basic necessities like bread and milk and gasoline. We have to do better. There's going to be a tax cut. It needs to be for the middle class. If that's what we've got to do. We've got to lift up our middle class. And what I can tell you is that the folks who have endorsed me in this campaign, who are grocery store workers, firefighters, educators, carpenters, these are hard-working families who know that I'm the fighter to take this to Congress and get this work done. I've got their back and they know it.
And Dr. Horn on the economy.
Thank you. I'm the only small business owner up here. I'm the only business owner at all. The workers are feeling the pain, absolutely. Inflation has been high. It was over 10%. Wages have not continued to meet that. So people are feeling the pain. Inflation is up. They're having a difficult time getting food on their counters. They're also worried about healthcare costs, and that has continued to go up. That's hurting the American people. The TSMC plant for chip manufacturing that's just outside our district helps people. It brings in union jobs. The Trump tax cuts, we absolutely need to repeal. But we need to be speaking with people about how they can get and maintain good jobs and how they can change from industry to industry. And we need to support our union workers and our trade schools.
Mr. Cromer, to the next topic. Do you believe there's a border crisis? And yes or no, what do you think we can do in this country to build a border that takes into account security and commerce?
I do not believe there is a border crisis. There are issues along the border, right? But it is not a crisis. And let me talk a little bit about what I mean around that. First off, the biggest issue is that it is taking too long for asylum claims to be adjudicated. And so what we need to do, and what I have advocated for, is to increase the number of immigration judges and staff so that those asylum claims can be adjudicated quickly, and folks can either stay because they passed the credible fear determination, or they do in fact get deported. The second thing, when people talk about the immigration crisis along the border, right? If you listen to Republicans, it's drugs coming all across the border. Guess what? About 85 to 90% of all drugs coming across the border are brought in by U.S. citizens at ports of entry. That is a fact. And if anybody tells you differently, they are telling you 2 + 2 is 5. The second thing they'll bring up is crime. Oh, we have an immigration crisis along the border because they're bringing in crime. Guess what? Crime is at historic lows. The murder rate went down 13% from last year. In small cities and in big cities, crime is down. So immigration, even those that are coming across undocumented, is not increasing crime. And it's also not increased this issue of taking jobs, right? That is not true. We have more jobs than we have people looking for jobs.
We'd love to have all of you weigh in on this one, at least briefly. Mr. O'Callahan, you have your hand up?
Yes, I think we absolutely have a crisis at the border, and we have to acknowledge that. People like immigration, they don't like chaos and disorder, and unfortunately that's what we've had. We need a candidate who can message strongly on this issue. I think it needs to be a four-pronged approach to fixing it. I think we need to have economic development in countries like Venezuela to stop migration at the source. We need to work with our Mexican counterparts to better secure the southern border of Mexico. We need to use our technological know-how to create a secure virtual border wall, which we can easily do with the technology we have. And we need to revamp the immigration judge and court system. It takes 4 to 6 years for people to get an asylum hearing. 90% of those claims ultimately get rejected. It needs to look more like passport control at the border, where at least 75% of those claims can be rejected on the spot. That'll help stem this migration crisis that we have and secure our border.
Ms. Glenn-Woods.
Thank you. I have been talking about immigration reform since the day I announced my candidacy. It's almost been a year now. We do have a crisis. We have a crisis this is a crisis we've had now for decades, almost 4 decades. And it's frankly a problem from both sides of the aisle here. So we have got to make sure that we pass comprehensive immigration reform. It includes Dreamers having a pathway to citizenship. It includes resources at the border so that Border Patrol agents have what they need to get the job done. It includes worker visa program so that we can continue. We have record unemployment so that we can have a rich employment base to draw from. Look, I'm a first-generation Cuban American. I know how hard immigrants work, and they are so thrilled to be in this country. Let's bring them in on a worker visa, above the radar, paying taxes and being part of our wonderful community. That's what we need to do. Republicans, on the other hand, have once again had an opportunity to pass a bill, and they didn't. Why didn't they? Because one guy told them not to. Donald Trump told them to kill an immigration bill, and they did it. And that, to me, looks like a dictatorship. We need to stop that, and we need grown-ups in the room.
Dr. Shaw.
Thank you. I am the proud son of Indian immigrants. My parents came seeking a better life, and they used the legal immigration system and have contributed mightily to this country. My dad was a small business owner who ran several businesses. That's what we are, a nation of immigrants, and we want to fix the legal immigration system because there is a backlog there. Now, when it comes to illegal immigration, we do have a crisis at the border. And we need to not have chaos and disorder. And so for me, I want to see a worker program where our industry would benefit, where people could go back and forth. We used to have this, but we don't as much anymore, and that's because we've lost the processing capacity. I would like to see the tiny group of people who are engaged in drug trafficking, getting fentanyl into Arizona, and those that are human trafficking to be held accountable, meaning either deported or put in jail. I would like to see the entire group of folks who are coming here for asylum seeking be adjudicated faster, but what's happening is that's the biggest area where there is a crisis, and that needs to stop. And yes, a pathway forward for DACA and Dreamers.
Now, we're going to stay on immigration, and it looks like we've kind of gotten into the plans. Dr. Orn, there's been a lot of runs at this over the years, going back to the Gang of Eight, to find a comprehensive solution. What is the mix, do you think, between do we need to trade stricter enforcement for a pathway to citizenship, or what do you think is the pathway forward that could actually get passed?
Well, first I'm going to say we do have a crisis at the border, and David Schweikert does not want to fix it. He voted against comprehensive immigration reform just a couple of months ago. He's been in office for 14 years now, and he has continually not wanted any immigration reform, and that's what we need to change. We need a mix of helping the border agents because they need to be able to process people more quickly. The people coming across the border have great intentions. They want to cross for a better future for themselves, for their family, for their children, and we need to keep that in mind. These are real people coming to America for change, for great things to help our economy, to help all of us. And so we need to process them more quickly so they're not waiting 7 years in order to get into this country. There's a lot that we need to do, and David Schweikert is against any change that can help the people.
Mr. Cherney, your thoughts?
This is not an issue where I've been talking about it for a year. This is something I've been working on for 25 years. I, as chair of the Arizona Democratic Party, took on Jan Brewer when she was trying to make this an issue that she was trying to divide our society and our state around. As Arizona Assistant Attorney General, I was a border prosecutor. We did one of the largest prosecutions taking down a human smuggling ring ever in Arizona history. Did one of the first wiretaps on a smuggling ring, bringing drugs and guns as well as people across the border. So I know this firsthand, and I can go toe-to-toe with David Schweikert. We need a nominee who can go toe-to-toe with him on this issue, and I've been taking the fight to him from day one. He's somebody who voted to cut Border Patrol. He's somebody who voted to cut the number of immigration judges. We need more resources on the border. We need reform. We need a pathway to citizenship. All of us are going to have the same position, but there's only one person here who can really, with credibility, take that fight to David Schweikert this fall.
Ms. Golan Woods, you made the reference to one person being the obstacle to getting some sort of comprehensive immigration bill or a border security bill passed. Knowing that there are voters in this district who can be registered independents, take a Democratic ballot, what would you say to some of those independents, and then in the general election potentially, who are Donald Trump supporters, maybe not to the most extreme, as some people might characterize it, but people who might be willing to listen to your message, what effort would you make to understand where they're coming from and then reach out to them for their vote? Would you try that?
Well, absolutely. I would try that. What I would say is, and what I referenced earlier, was that bill in the Senate. They had a bipartisan bill in the U.S. Senate that was ready to go, and they had the votes for it. It was a pretty conservative bill. And Donald Trump called Republicans and said, kill it. He wanted it gone because he wanted that as a wedge issue in this election. That's wrong. That's wrong. They had a bill ready to go, and like I said, that sounds like a dictatorship to me. So what would I say to a potential voter, maybe a Trump voter? Those exact same words. That's what I would say. We need to be able to have difficult conversations with one another again when we might disagree on other things. I'm willing to have those conversations as long as there's respect and dignity at the table. We need to do that.
So,
Well, do you understand also the appeal of Donald Trump, or why there's so many voters who are attracted to that message?
of course, he's a snake oil salesman. But I wanted to just chime in on something that Ms. Galan-Woods said that I thought was pretty striking. She said that this has been an issue for 4 decades and that there's blame to be had on both sides of the aisle. And I realize that Ms. Galan-Woods was a Republican for most of those 4 decades, but that's just simply not true. We've had 3 solid bipartisan efforts at comprehensive immigration reform in the last 20 years. David Schweikert's been a part of 2 of those efforts, and he and his cronies have helped kill it every time. 0 for 3 the Republicans are on this issue. So to try to pin it on Democrats, I think, is disingenuous and untrue. We are the party that's going to finally deliver comprehensive immigration reform for this country.
Mr. Cromer, your thoughts
Just
on
a
Trump?
quick
Sure.
little response back. Look, all of my colleagues are basically talking about the Republican talking points, right? Right now, we just heard that the Republicans are using immigration as a cudgel because they don't want to fix the problem. And yet, most of the folks here are parroting the Republican talking points about immigration. This is why this has become an issue, because we are not honest with people. We do not state the facts. And the facts are that crime is down. Most people have a job, right? Higher wages would be great. Drugs are being brought in by U.S. citizens mostly. This is what we need to talk about. And then we need to have the comprehensive reform. We obviously need to do that. But that can be done. That doesn't mean that there's a crisis and that somehow there's these hordes of people, as Donald Trump said, right, ruining the blood of our nation. How despicable. How outright despicable.
Mr. Cherney.
I think for your question about how do we reach out to those voters, that's going to be incredibly important. Look, David Schweiker barely won in 2022. And yet we saw our statewide candidates, people like Mark Kelly, won by 6-7%. Joe Biden carried this district. And so we need a nominee who is grounded in democratic values, who has a track record, because people are looking for somebody who they understand, somebody they trust, somebody who has actually done things to advance the ball for the critical issues facing middle-class families. And my ability to do that, along with talking about my experience as a border prosecutor, my experience serving in the military, my experience building a business. We created a business that created thousands of jobs, and one of the things I did was when COVID hit, we raised our company's minimum wage to $25 an hour. And a lot of people, like perhaps David Schweikert, would say, oh, you're going to hurt your business. We did better than ever before. We were one of Inc. magazine's fastest growing businesses in America. The same year we were rated one of the best places to work, because the way to build a business is to invest in people. That's a message that Republicans are open to and ready to hear as well.
Dr. Horn, is it feasible someone could vote for Donald Trump and you on that same ballot?
Well, that's, I'll tell you that I speak with people across the aisle every day. I'm out knocking on doors, speaking on the phone with people of all different opinions. There are things that we can come together on. Absolutely. Public education is something that people want a good future for their family. David Schweikert is destroying people's future. Guns is something that Donald Trump supporters or others I have a different view about guns than a Donald Trump supporter, for the most part. That's something that we don't see eye to eye on. Okay, well, let's get things that we do agree on passed. Let's work on the issues like our economy. How can we help people? Donald Trump has a lot of supporters because people have, they're feeling hurt. They're feeling that their wages have not risen to the level that they've expected. And we can help people with that. Democrats, and I am very good on that issue. I speak to people all day long that are across the political spectrum, and we find agreements, and they want to help with my campaign.
Dr. Shaw, bipartisanship.
Thank you for the question. Well, I've run 3 times and I've won 3 times, and it wasn't close in the competitive elections. I was always the top vote getter, and the reason was, again, I said I went and knocked on close to 20,000 doors. So the people in my district understand why they voted for me. So I ran into lots and lots of Trump supporters, and I listened to them. And what they said was that they didn't feel heard by either party. They wanted somebody that they felt cared about them. And yes, over the course of my 3 elections, I had many people who said they voted for Donald Trump and voted for me. And you know why? Because they said, you listened. You came here, you listened, you showed up. And they said, look, they felt that he cared for them. I said, my job is to care for you more than you think he does. And if I can deliver on that, then I want to make sure, I may disagree with you on values and issues, but you won't doubt that I care for you, and I'm going to make sure that I stay in communication with you so you know how.
Mr. Cromer, very brief follow-up just for you. Are you saying that these talking points, whatever they may be, are strictly for the MAGA voters? Are you saying that a person who would vote Democratic or be an independent should not believe some of these things? You think it's just perception as far as there being danger at the border or an immigration crisis, whatever it may be?
Well, I think, right, a lot of the MAGA talking points, the reason it's been fairly successful is that it's started to resonate beyond just the small group of people that are in the MAGA base, right?
But
that
you think it
doesn't mean
resonates
it's true,
falsely, though? Okay.
right? And if we repeat it enough times, Democrats, if we repeat it enough times, all we're doing is making that resonate more and more. We have to be honest and courageous. And being courageous means standing up and saying, some of these things are just incorrect.
And to any one of you who use the word crisis, I mean, is there something that says that the public sees what's happening and might not understand why you're not labeling it a crisis?
Well, I think the challenge for all of us on this stage, we're trying to take on David Schweikert, is the border and the economy are our blind spots as Democrats. I think abortion is and should be the defining issue in this election, in the Senate election, in the presidential election. But if we're single issue candidates and it's just abortion, 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 we risk losing these general elections. So we need a candidate who's strong on the border, strong on the economy, and acknowledges and recognizes the real challenges that we face, that we as Democrats need to lead and solve.
Mr. Cherney, well, I'm going to move to a slightly different topic, but as you may have noticed, the House is in a little bit of chaos, especially with the leadership. So I guess a 2-parter. Would you have voted to keep Speaker Johnson? And what generally do you think can be done to calm the chaos in that chamber?
Well, look, on your first question, when it came time to vote to make sure we are bringing needed aid to Israel and Ukraine, and he stuck his neck out, yeah, I would have made sure that he didn't lose his job because in that case, at least, if not in many, many other cases, he did the right thing. But the larger question is one that's important. To me, it's about getting things done. It's about results. It's not about bipartisanship for bipartisanship's sake. It's not about compromise for its own sake. It's ultimately about, do you actually get results for people? When I served as a prosecutor, when I served in the military, when I was a CEO and a business leader, it was all about what you did to get results. And that doesn't mean that people have to always agree together, but it means that you have to find a way to work together. I'll give you an example. I worked, as you know, in the White House for President Clinton at a time that he and Newt Gingrich, 2 people who were not best of friends and did not like each other, came together, even despite all of that, to balance the budget for the first time in decades, to run the first budget surplus in more than 180 years, to create the Children's Health Insurance Program, expand college loans for people. They got things done, even if they weren't best of friends. That's the kind of spirit we need in Washington. Not a do-nothing spirit, but a spirit of people who are saying, I'm going to go there and I'm going to be held accountable for making a real difference for people.
Dr. Horn, your hand is up.
Yes, absolutely. So the question was, how do we view the chaos in Washington, D.C. right now? I think that's a big issue. I think that's what leads someone like me, who's not steeped in politics, somebody who's an outsider. I haven't been working in Washington or Wall Street or New York for decades. I'm a father who does not like what he sees happening, who knows that the people of this district agree with me about the issues that we need to take to Washington, and we need compromise. We need real people in office, not lifelong politicians like David Schweikert, who started in 1988. We need real people who will go to Washington and make the choices that are right for Arizona.
Dr. Shah.
Thank you. When I first ran, people told me at those doors, they said, you can't get anything done there at the Arizona House of Representatives. Why are you going down there? You're a physician, you have a nice practice. And I said, no, I just don't believe it. I believe that there's still hope that we can get something done. And I proved them wrong. I went down there and I built trust and relationships. And from my understanding, after speaking to several members of Congress, they do feel they made a difference, and several of them on both sides of the aisle there are a group of people down there who are passing bills and solving problems for the people that's there. So it's not everything that the media reports, that it's just partisanship, fighting, and dysfunction. There is a group of people there. Ed Pastor, the late Ed Pastor, used to say, are you going to be a workhorse or a show horse? Well, my record over the last few years has been really clear. Again, more bills than any Democrat in over a decade in this state. And that's what you need. You need to be able to have somebody who goes down there and gets the job done.
Okay, Mr. O'Callaghan, very briefly before the next question.
Yeah, I think we're gaslighting voters a little bit if we're pretending like this is a state of bipartisanship that we're in. The reality is we need this MAGA fever to break. But if we want to make progress on abortion rights, common sense gun reform, fighting climate change, securing the border, we as Democrats are going to have to get that done. Because as we've seen, as Ms. Woods said, the MAGAs are not going to help us. So we need to keep the White House, we need to keep the Senate, we need to win this seat and flip the House. That is the only way we're going to make progress on these issues.
Ms. Glenn-Woods, one topic that has come up on the stage is that some of the people on the stage have been Democrats for their entire lives, some have not. Can you explain to us why you are a Democrat?
Well, I'll start with this. My values have never changed. I have always been pro-choice, pro-democracy, pro-climate. My values have never changed. What changed was the Republican Party. I am a Democrat because we are going to help the middle class. We are going to make sure that we codify Roe. That is what we are going to do. And you know, just to speak to the question before, we need to be able to listen to folks. I'm a journalist and a writer, and listening is important. So we can reach across the aisle to get some things done, but we must say we have to flip the House. The chaos that's going on here is all Republican-led, MAGA-led. We have to reach across to those who might be reasonable to get some work done.
And I imagine we'll all weigh in on this. Mr. Cromer.
Yeah, I appreciate what Ms. Woods said. However, and the however is, the Republican Party has never been for comprehensive immigration reform. The Republican Party has never been for a woman's right to choose. The Republican Party has never wanted to protect Social Security and Medicare. They have always, for decades, tried to eviscerate it. The Republican Party has always tried to minimize the ability of people to vote. That hasn't changed for decades. So I don't know what, Trump is Trump. The Republican Party is still the Republican Party, and their, if you can call them any policy positions that they have, those have not changed.
Mr. O'Callaghan.
So for my entire lifetime, it has been a stated mission of the Republican Party to overturn Roe v. Wade. They were finally successful in doing so. Ms. Woods has been on the political scene here in Arizona for decades. When Planned Parenthood was under attack in the court system here in the 90s, where was Ms. Woods speaking out against that? She supported Jan Brewer this millennium. She gave money to Jan Brewer. Jan Brewer, in addition to passing SB 1070, in addition to being anti-union, passed at the time one of the most draconian abortion laws in this country. She was a huge, loud champion for Mitt Romney, who was unabashedly pro-choice, and she retweeted a pro-life, was unabashedly pro-life, and she retweeted a pro-life tweet from Ben Sass in 2017. That does not sound like somebody who's been a stalwart for women's rights for decades.
We need to give you a rebuttal time, and I guess your values haven't changed. Did the Republicans, Jan Brewer, John McCain, did they comport with your values?
Let me start with a few things that Mr. O'Callaghan just said. And I'll start with this. This is why people have, voters, Americans, are sick and tired of politicians. This is why people are cynical about the process. Because people like Mr. O'Callaghan are willing to lie, are willing to misrepresent the truth of someone else's record and positions for their own political gain. The fact of the matter is, that tweet that he refers to is a tweet that has to do with adoption. Ben Sass was talking about an adoption credit for parents. I am an adoptive mother. My husband and I adopted a little girl from Guatemala. So I supported a tax break for adoptive parents. He knows that that's what that was about. The Jan Brewer check, it was a $140 check 15 years ago. I don't remember it. My values have never changed, and do you know who knows this? Emily's List knows this. Attorney General Chris Mays has endorsed my candidacy because she trusts who I am, my values, and the work that I'll get done.
We are crunched for time, Mr. Cherney.
Look, it comes back to what I said at the beginning. We need a nominee who's going to have a track record the Democrats have trust. The reason people don't like politics is not because of this kind of conversation. It's because people run for office and say all the right things at election time and do something very different once they get there. That's why we need somebody who's actually been in these fights, who's been taking on the Republicans for decades when it comes to choice, taking on them when it comes to gun rights. It's why groups like the League of Conservation Voters looked at everybody here and chose to support me. The Brady PAC against gun violence looked at all of us and said there's one candidate who actually has a track record of making this happen, even against decades of Republican opposition.
And I'm sorry, we're getting close to the end. So it is time, because we need to have everyone speak, it's time for closing statements. Each of you have 1 minute. And to keep us on time, we will politely cut you off if you run over. Dr. Shaw, you have the first closing
Well,
statement.
thank you. I appreciate all of you spending time with us tonight. This is, thank you to the moderators and all my colleagues. Look, the voters of Congressional District number 1 have an important responsibility. They are going to choose a nominee up here, and this seat might control the entire, might control the entire United States House of Representatives. And it's, for the last 6 cycles, we've run somebody who'd never won an election before. We need somebody who knows how to win and knows how to do the job. I talk about healthcare, education, and democracy. I didn't get to weigh in on the last question, but these things are important to me. Universal healthcare, cover everybody and lower the costs, fund public education, stop all these attacks on our democracy, fight climate change. All of these are my voting record over the last 5 years, actually doing the job in the legislature. I'm going to keep doing the same thing in Congress. I hope to earn your vote. Thank you so much.
Mr. O'Callaghan, closing statement.
Once again, I'm Connor O'Callaghan, and I'm running to be your Democratic nominee to finally defeat MAGA extremist David Schweikert this November. It is critically important that we nominate a candidate with the team and resources to win. But more importantly, it's important that we nominate somebody who can flip this seat without sacrificing our democratic principles and our values. If you supported Jan Brewer, SB 1070, draconian abortion laws, anti-union, if you were part of the problem for 40 years, you were complicit, and that should be disqualifying. If you were a registered Republican and you voted for Donald Trump for any reason at any time, that should be disqualifying. You have a lot of options in this race, but if you want to defeat David Schweikert finally after 14 years with a real Democrat, you only have one choice, and that is me. Vote Connor O'Callaghan this July and visit connor4az.com to learn more. Thank you very much.
Ms. Gallon-Woods, the next closing statement.
We have a lot of work to get done. We have to have access to abortion care. We need to protect our democracy. We have got to protect Social Security and Medicare. We can do this together. We can beat David Schweikert together. David Schweikert would pass a national ban on abortion. David Schweikert has voted to undo a presidential election. My parents risked everything to come to this country. No one will fight harder than me for our democracy. I am the only woman here, the only mother and grandmother. I promise you that no one will fight like me to make sure that every girl and every woman in this country has power over her own body. I will tell you who knows I am the fighter we need today. Emily's List, Attorney General Chris Mays, former Governor Janet Napolitano. These people have endorsed me. Grocery store workers, firefighters, teachers, they know I'm the fighter we need. They trust me to beat David Schweikert. They trust me to take this message to Congress and get the work done. I look forward to earning your trust, your support, and your vote. Thank you.
Mr. Cromer, you have the next closing statement.
Thank you. Look, who is best positioned to defeat David Schweikert? I think there's 4 tests. The first one is, who is the candidate that has the broadest set of experiences and knowledge? Who's the most qualified? That would be me. The second test is, who is the candidate who has the broadest set of results that have helped people? I have done that domestically, I've done that internationally. That would be me. Third test, who is the candidate that has had the most leadership roles? I've been the CEO and the COO of multiple entities, multi-million-dollar entities. That would be me. And then maybe the fourth test is, who has the resources to defeat Schweikert? Well, guess what? Whoever wins this primary is going to have more money than they're going to know what to do with. So that's a tie. So at the end of the day, I am the candidate that is most in the best position to defeat David Schweikert, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Dr. Horn, the next closing statement is yours.
Thank you. I'm running to remove David Schweikert because he does not hold our values. Last July, I was at a July 4th parade in Phoenix. David Schweikert was there. At his table, for his campaign, he had handguns on the table. It was $5 for a raffle ticket to get one of David Schweikert's handguns. That's the opposite of what I want to be seeing. David Schweikert is against us on gun reform, on gun safety, on public education. Eleanor this week, on Monday, could not spend the day in her 5th grade class. They didn't have a teacher. They don't have the resources that they need. She spent the day in 1st grade because public education is on the chopping block by people like David Schweikert. We need someone in Congress who's going to fight for the values of our community and who's going to remove David Schweikert. My name's Andrew Horn, and I appreciate your vote this July. Thank you.
And Andre Cherney, you have the final closing statement.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll bet you saw tonight what I said you would see in my spoiler alert. A bunch of people all agreeing on the same issues, but with very different backgrounds and experiences. Again, I'm the only person standing here with a 25-year track record of actually fighting for democratic values, fighting to make this community, this state, this country a better place. And I've put my values into action. There's an old phrase, don't tell me what you're going to do, show me what you've done. Whether it was working in the White House with Bill Clinton, whether it was working with Barack Obama to write his policy for America, whether it was serving the military, serving as Arizona Assistant Attorney General, taking on fraudsters, or whether it was building a business that created thousands of jobs, I've done things. When Roe v. Wade was getting struck down, we made sure that every employee in our company had abortion access, no matter what state they lived in. That's the kind of experience, that's the kind of leader we need to beat David Schweikert and make a difference in Washington.
Thanks very much to all of you for being here tonight. And this wraps today's debate with the Democratic candidates for Arizona Congressional District 1. As a reminder, the Arizona primary election is on July 30th, and early voting starts July 3rd. All registered voters can participate in the primary, including independents.
There are a lot of offices up for election this year, so we'll keep hosting debates throughout the summer and fall. Head to azmedia.org to see a list of every local media partner, plus upcoming debates and where you can find them on TV, radio, and digital platforms. You can also see the full debate schedule, learn more about voting, and submit questions for future debates by heading to azcleanelections.gov. On behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister, and Bitfire Studios, thanks for joining us.